Welcome and thank you for joining us in this webinar today. We thought that the legal sector would be an interesting topic to cover. It's a sector that's going through some rapid changes. I have with me Nic Pryke from Oktra, and we're going to talk through some of the challenges in the legal sector and some of our experience in helping law firms solve some of those challenges around workplace. A bit of housekeeping first. The chat, I think, is enabled, so if you've got any questions, please post them for us. We will review the questions as we get towards the end of this webinar. We will also be sending out a copy of the recording. This has been recorded out to everyone, and we'll also send out links to some of the reports that we reference in this. So, welcome. Agenda, I'm going to explore some of the trends and challenges, going to look at some of the things to consider and some of our experiences in this area. Some examples of where Condeco have provided solutions, technology solutions for law firms, and also where Oktra have worked with law firms in workspace projects, and then Q&A at the end. So introduction, so my name is Jon Cook. I'm an account manager here at Condeco. I've been within workplace for about the last 10 years, both in workplace technology vendors and also in workspace providers. For those of you that don't know, Condeco is a market leader in providing scalable cloud-based solutions for workspace management. I'm just going to hand over to Nic to introduce himself.
Thanks, John. My name's Nic Pryke. I'm the creative director of Oktra. Oktra just does one thing, which is to create workspace for our clients, which we hope will inspire them to do amazing things. We design them and we build them. And when we work with legal clients, we spend a lot of time talking to them about what they want, what they think they want, and challenging those requirements and testing them before we actually start designing.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Nic. So if we look at workplace and we look at organizations, workplace is forever changing. In my years, I've heard people talk about the future of work. I think that's a bit of an outdated phrase now because the future of work is here. Way that people and businesses operate and firms operate is changing all the time. But the business objectives that underpin that haven't really changed. If we look at the top three, your two biggest costs are people and space. So there's always an objective on trying to reduce cost, increase productivity, but more we're finding things are people focused, and the attraction and retention of talent is a key top three in every single organization that we talk to. The change within workplace is driven by a few things. New technology, new generation of employees. People talk about millennials. We've had talk of X, Y, Z generation. That continues to change. One of the other key things is the mobilization of the workforce, whereby we're seeing more and more people work remotely, work flexibly, and that has to be catered for both in the space that organizations provide for employees, but also the technologies they use to support that way of working. A couple of stats. I mean, we found in the Condeco did a workplace survey in 2019. Two biggest challenges the organization faced were digital transformation and adoption of new technology. Oktra did a similar report around workplace. I think one of the key things out of that is there's still a big debate about open plan versus private workspaces. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nic. I think that's an ongoing discussion.
It is an ongoing discussion in a funny sort of way. You know, we work across all sectors in a funny sort of way. The legal sector is a bit behind, if you like, if you don't mind me saying that, but catching up fast. You know, it's interesting what you said, John. I was at a workplace conference run by the Henley Business School last month, and Richard Potter, who's the Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft, said that organizations and businesses that are going to succeed in this time of terrific accelerating change are the ones that are able to be agile and change and respond to that, rather than, you know, the kind of old-fashioned idea perhaps of having a sort of massive goal somewhere in the distance that everybody's trying to work towards. So I think agility and the ability to respond to change, especially enabled by technology, is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's, things are forever changing. Gone are the days of creating a workspace, right? Saying it's there for 10, 15 years. That's what we work with. You have to build flexibility into the workspace, and that's both in the physical space and in some of the technologies and tools that you use. If we look at the key trends in the legal sector, there's ongoing pressure on cost, a lot of it from competition. There's been a lot of changes within the legal sector, both in the way that legal firms are structured, how services are provided, and with new entrants, there's pressures on cost. Those pressures mean that law firms need to be more responsive in terms of the way that they change. And the legal industry and law firms are very traditional way of working, very traditional businesses. That's an area that is changing rapidly and almost moving to a more consultancy-based mindset of how those types of services are being procured by organizations. From a technology perspective, there have been some AI is quite a loose term, but some automation with regards to some of the tasks that happen within law firms, whether it's on reviewing documents, whether it's on collating costs. All those sorts of technologies are making organizations more efficient, but it's trying to get additional cost savings from productivity and from the space that's being used.
Yeah, I think you're right. AI is being used for things like contract analytics, and if those tasks are dealt with by that kind of technology, it means that perhaps there's going to be a shift in the way that lawyers work, and the skills, the kind of more human-centric skills, if you like, are going to become more important. Things like creativity, a more consultancy approach, persuasion, these sorts of skill sets, I suppose. It's interesting you mentioned, Jon, attracting talent. In our experience, that's risen right up to the top of the brief for a lot of workspace. Millennials, Gen Y, if you like, who are now over half of the workforce, demand something different of the workplace than perhaps the baby boomers like myself did. And they expect the workplace environment to be great, basically. And it's we know from our own research, nearly 80% of Gen Ys will talk about the quality of their workplace environment as really important to them when they're choosing an employer. And we also know that in the legal sector, for instance, about half of associates will perhaps move their firm within 5 years. So attracting talent and retaining it is absolutely key to a successful new workplace.
So for us, it was interesting that these are some of the things that are looked at by a lot of organizations, but the fact that it seems to be a more rapid transformation and more rapid changes within the legal sector than maybe some other sectors. Historically, financial services has been an area that has been slow to move, if you like, in terms of agile working, but that seems to be being adapted and adopted by a lot of financial service organisations. I think we'll see the same change within the legal sector over the coming years with some of these pressures on them.
Workforce and workplace.
And workplace, yeah. They are intrinsically linked. We talked about retaining and attracting talent. If we look at law firms, it is a stressful vocation. You want a happy workforce. And to make the workforce happy, you need them to be able to get the job done. So they need the appropriate workplace in which to do it. So they are intrinsically linked, and you can't take away you can't divide the two. You need to have the workforce with the tools that they need to be able to do their job, but you also need the environment and the workplaces available for them to do that. So an interesting conversation I had the other week where they hadn't made that consideration at all. It was a case of IT specifically were looking at developing some strategies around workplace technology. You had corporate real estate looking at the workplace and what work settings were required by their employees, but actually they hadn't linked the two together. And if you don't do that, you're not coming up with a coherent strategy. that's going to have the maximum benefit for your organisation or for the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about in our design office, when we talk about workplace environments, we're talking about behaviour, and when we're talking about behaviour, we're talking about people. And they're the complicated bit, if you like. You could design a space to deliver the different settings you need for the different tasks that are done in that space. But the people have to come on board and be taken on that journey too. And they have to understand how to use that space. And it's about change, isn't it? You know, when you, a lot of legal firms are run by older people, baby boomers, for instance, you know, over 50 or older, Gen X. And the change, if you like, should be understood and driven from the bottom up in a way, rather than from the top down. It's an interesting thing. If you say to somebody, you know what, the way you've worked for decades and understand and been successful with, we're going to come along and we're going to change all that. It's just human nature. We're wired to think negative thoughts about that. And you need to deal with that and create spaces that everybody's on board with using. And it's not just about work settings. There's all the other human aspects to that you need to take into account. The word well-being, of course, you know, we can talk about that for 20 minutes quite easily, but that's a part of that scenario. But also creating spaces that will accommodate introverted people, extroverted people, people who need quiet to do focused work, people who need noise to, you know, get energy. So all these different aspects of people and behaviour.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we wanted to just go through and share with you a couple of things that have come out of the reports that both Condeco and Oktra have done. I mean, we talked about, mentioned earlier, the debate between open plan and private space. Interesting stat from Oktra's report: 52% of employees in the legal sector specifically prefer private space to work in, compared to 37% for allocated space in an open plan environment. Now, that obviously dictates or suggests that employees in the legal sector, in law firms, do need areas where they can focus and they can work. But it also suggests that that's not the only space that they need. So having a range of spaces is fairly important. In terms of kind of from a workspace perspective, from the Condeco report, we can see here kind of changing over what people are seeing as biggest challenges from today into 5 years. It's less about the space and it's more about managing or adapting to employee expectations, and also digitizing the workplace with integration of technology. So technology does play a key part in workplace strategies. And again, when looking at developing strategies for workplace of the future, what are the potential greatest benefits from an organization? Improving productivity came out on top. It's got improving creativity and innovation. Reducing costs is in there, it's always going to be in there. Increased flexibility and agility. So all very much people-focused items and points, as opposed to some of the ones that maybe historically have been important. So in terms of things to consider, we've touched on some of this already in some of the points that have been made, but it isn't one size fits all. There are a range of work settings depending on the sector that the business operates in, depending on the demographics of the employees. It needs to have flexibility and agility. And one thing I'd like to highlight in this particular slide is with regards to input from across the firm. Again, we've already touched on it, and it's probably similar with you, Nic, in the engagements that you have, that typically for me, we're talking a lot to IT departments because they're looking at deploying a solution, but actually they can't do that in isolation. You need to have a input from across the firm, from real estate, facilities, HR and IT. They all play a part in the workplace and in the technology that supports the workplace.
I mean, that's right. Every organisation is different. And we would always start a project by spending a long time doing what you might call workplace consultancy and understanding that organisation. It's interesting, you know, when we've mentioned that kind of cellular versus open plan discussion, but it's a bit simplistic to think of it like that. And actually, it's not about having offices or not having offices. It's about having a traditional cellular layout or having a completely holistic solution to an agile working environment, whereby it's not just open plan desks. They're just one of a whole range of different sorts of settings and facilities that will be in that space. I was actually at a large legal firm a little while ago, and they'd been forced to put one of their practice teams out of offices onto desks just because they'd run out of space. And it was, an unpopular move. And I was getting feedback around the fact that this thing wasn't going to work because of that reason, that experience.
Yeah.
But all they'd done is actually taken people's walls down and given them desks and all that other stuff, which is so important, which supports, a successful agile working space, wasn't present. So I find it a little bit irksome when it's kind of open plan versus cellular.
Because it isn't that black and white.
It isn't that black and white, exactly.
And that I guess goes back to the point of the workplace has changed, continues to change. It used to be open plan versus private space, but actually there's a whole range of work settings. Speak to clients where they have a whole different range of booths, and we talked earlier about like phone pods, phone booths, focus rooms, huddle spaces, scrum tables. There's a whole range of space, but it is important to understand or have an understanding of the type of workspace that's needed for the employees for the different types of work, and it does vary even
across practice groups.
Yeah, exactly. Within an organisation, let alone across organisations. There's always that factor of people generally don't like change. There's the element of communication and interacting with the workforce to make sure that the reasons for that change are communicated. But in my role, a lot of the conversations I have are the solutions we're providing are supporting employees. It's technology that's enabling employees to be able to find space so that their access to the types of space that they need is as easy as possible. And that's really important, because putting technology in for the sake of technology doesn't work. You need to have a strategy that is linking the technology with the workplace and the workplace with the workforce.
I had an interesting conversation with a lawyer the other day who said that they had resistance to change and they were struggling with their technology, and it became apparent that some of the more senior people in the business, who were the decision makers, actually felt very exposed when they were asked to behave in a more digital way in their work style. Because they couldn't do simple things like use Dropbox type FTP sites and things like that. Maybe even attach things to emails, and they put in place a training program which was a one-to-one at your desk type thing, rather than let's get everybody in a room and explain how this works. And it changed things around. So
absolutely, I think that's a great idea. I mean, because anecdotally you hear lots of stories, and we were talking earlier about the type of the demographic of the people of the key players within some of these organisations, and they're the ones sometimes that are slow to change because of where they sit in the kind of demographic. So that kind of idea really does give it that top-down approach, because it is important that you have buy-in throughout the management structure for that to feed through down into employees. I'm conscious of time. A couple of things we just wanted to cover off with regards to examples. So from a technology perspective, we look at where the Condeco solutions can solve challenges. That can be around access to finding the right space and maximising the use of space. Challenges around not being able to understand who's got what space booked. It's all around making the space work harder. It's all around having the workforce enabled and interacting with that space, and essentially making it easier to do work. So finding space to get it done. I know Nick wanted to say a few words about Wedlake Bell.
Well, Wedlake Bell is one of the clients. They were a great client. In particular, the managing partner Martin Arnold was very willing and very bold and confident about embracing change. And we took them from an environment in a fairly traditional type of building, from a traditional legal layout with about 80 plus offices to a space where they don't have a singular office, if you like, cellular space of that kind. It was that's a huge cultural shift, and it's what we were talking about. And in a way, that cultural shift was the biggest part of the challenge of the project. But I was talking to Martin a little while ago, and he said that he had an interesting statistic around productivity, which was that their revenue per square foot went up nearly 40% when
Wow.
they moved. So that's, when you think that, as you said earlier, your building, if you like, your floor space is your second most expensive overhead after people, that's an important statistic. But there's all the other benefits that you gain from working in a more agile way around improved collaboration, mentoring, being more agile and flexible, even kind of legal specific things like dealing with the changing ratios in fee earner to admin staff.
Yeah.
When I started designing offices, it was practically 1 secretary to 2 fee earners, and now it's about 1 to 5, and that's still moving around.
Yeah, and that just shows that changes like that within the workforce have implications in what's needed in the workplace, and that's something that's changed in the last couple of years and will continue to change. So, we've got a little bit of time for question, maybe one question. Had one question in. What advice can you give for a firm looking to open up space in an office? I guess this relates back to having quite a traditional law firm layout, looking to provide some kind of more agile type space.
Yeah, John, what I say to clients is be bold and do it properly. There's a lot of because the way legal firms in particular are run, with a set of partners, if you like.
Yeah.
There's sometimes their management structure is a bit more democratic, maybe, than some corporate businesses that we work with. And you quite often see that kind of compromise where walls come down, but they're replaced with very high filing cabinets. So they kind of create offices without walls instead of fully embracing a proper agile environment where they'll get the benefits of the space saving, for instance. That's one of the simple ones, as well as other things, and they'll create that cross collaboration and so forth. So be bold and go the whole hog and do it properly. That's my advice. Yeah.
And would you say, just on the back of that, when you're talking to organisations and they're looking at their space and how it might change, do they already have an idea of going to agile, or is it a little bit more of an educational process within this sector of what agile is and how it relates to them?
It's first of all, it's specific to every organisation. They're going to do that in a different way.
Yeah.
But absolutely, it's fundamentally important to do some kind of change management piece alongside the creation of the new workplace. Okay.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's us out of time. It's a topic we could probably spend a little bit longer talking about. But thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining us for this today. We will follow up with a copy of the recording and send out some additional information for those of you that have attended. But thanks again. Thank you, Nic.
Thank you.
And we will speak to you soon.